This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, February 2nd, 1980, NBC breaks the news of what came to be known as the ABSCAM sting operation. Look, if you've seen the movie American Hustle, you know about ABSCAM: cheap suits, bad toupees, wiretaps, video surveillance, and an FBI operation with some very sketchy informants that eventually rolled up 7 members of Congress and other local officials for taking bribes in exchange for things like casino licenses, government contracts, lots more shady stuff. And look, do I even need to point out that this largely took place in New Jersey? I have deep love for New Jersey. My wife is from New Jersey. But sometimes New Jersey is as New Jersey does. And this is certainly a very New Jersey story. Look, we haven't touched on ABSCAM on this show before, but it kind of falls, to me at least, in that window of like one of the best known obscure incidents, you know, a thing that people always bring up as something that not that many people know about. But that is a nice sweet spot for us, and a bunch of people have asked that we talk through ABSCAM. So we're going to go through the basics and then also some larger questions about what it says about corruption, graft, how government functions and doesn't function, and lots more. So here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
American Hustle is a good movie. I think it really holds up.
Haven't
It's been
seen
a while
it.
since I've
You haven't seen it?
You haven't seen
I
it?
still haven't seen it. No, and it's so funny because you say it's the best known unknown story in a way. I think it's because ABSCAM is such like a fun thing to say.
It
There's
helps.
something about like the arrangement of letters. So you hear about ABSCAM, but I have to say, until about like 5 or 6 years ago, I don't think I had any idea what it actually involved.
Yeah.
No, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie too.
Yeah.
So I was like, wait, what happened?
American Hustle, great plane movie. I mean, great movie, but just a great plane movie. If you
Yes,
happen to be on a plane,
yes.
it's a nice one to
Absolutely.
visit there. So ABSCAM, the AB in ABSCAM stands for Abdul Enterprises, which is a fake company that is created at the heart of all this. But Kellie, this is a story of like one sting that then morphs into another sting and gets much more complicated. But as simply as we can put it, what is at the heart of the ABSCAM sting?
So basically, an FBI agent by the name of John Good says, I'm going to create this sting operation to investigate like theft, forgery, stolen art, all of that. And he hires convicted con artist, a guy by the name of Melvin Weinberg, and his girlfriend, Evelyn Knight. And he's like, listen, you guys are going to be informants. And in exchange, you know, we will give you probation. We'll shorten your prison sentences. We'll even give you a check. Like, we'll pay you to do this work, which is wild. They're paying like $3,000 a month.
$3,000 a month in 78, 79?
Yes,
That's a lot of
79.
money.
They also
It
have
is.
like performance bonuses too, you know. Oh, you
Yes,
got
yes.
Of course, Weinberg is constant, and this happens in the movie too. But you know, he's a very over the top character. I mean, it's like, what do you get when you hire a con man to run your operation? Always complaining that he's not being paid enough. Always complaining that he's doing all the work, and He's trying to con back in the other direction. I think.
I mean,
he's trying to
con
hustle.
artists are
Everyone's
gonna
trying to
con,
hustle.
you know,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Yes.
So
Always
this is where they
hustling.
create this fake company, Abdul Enterprises. And yeah, it starts out trying to be about stolen art and then quickly morphs. But what is Abdul Enterprise? I mean, all of these names are so over the top.
It really is over the top. And there's, you know, there are costumes and there are like all of these sort of like dupes in order to get people to sort of fall into the plot. But initially, they do sort of help with some art schemes. Like, they're able to recover almost like $1 million of stolen art. So that's not a bad thing. But when they create these Abdul Enterprises, that basically it's this fictional company that's run by Arab sheiks, and they are these investors that want to invest in the United States and, you know, get their hands in different corporations. And it just turns out that they want to invest in New Jersey casinos.
So wait, the names
in
of the
order to
sheiks
get-
that they come up with? Kamir Abdul Rahman and Yasir Habib. What's the most generous way I can put this? If you asked ChatGPT to come up with the names of 2 fake Arab sheiks. Unfortunately, this is the slop that it would put.
Yes.
Put out.
If J.K. Rowling had Arab wizards, these would be their names.
This would be their names.
Kambir
Absolutely.
Abdul Rahman and Yasser Habib.
But the thing is, people are so naive. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, sure. How can I help you?
Well,
they came in with like 2 sacks with dollar signs on them. They were like, okay.
yeah,
Money speaks, money talks.
And there's a larger, your point there. People are so naive. There's a larger thing which we can get to, which is about kind of. I mean, this is a story as much of anything as like one about kind of motivated reasoning and human psychology and people's inability to kind of like really question what's happening in front of them. And there's all sorts of interesting blurry lines here and how this goes down. But basically, right, they start out with this artwork thing, but then they're in these rooms with all these rich people, and the rich people are like, hey, you're a sheik, you want to throw some money around, maybe you should talk to politicians. They're the ones who kind of really have their hands on the lever, and all of a sudden it just starts to grow and grow and grow, and all of a sudden
Spiral.
There's casinos and congressmen and all these other things sort of wrapped up into it.
Yeah, there's a number of different members of Congress who get involved in this scheme. It starts, as you were saying, New Jersey politicians. The main or like the first political figure who gets involved is the mayor of Camden, a guy named Angelo Ericetti. And the sheiks come up to him because they want to get licenses. They want to get like favorable immigration papers. And so they offer him some money, and he's like, hell yeah, I'll give you Atlantic City. What do you want? It's all for sale. And then he's like, actually, I can help you with Atlantic City, and I can get you like all of these licenses for, you want to sell liquor, you want to gamble, whatever. But if you really want to get like immigration and different things like that, we need people in the federal government. And guess what? New Jersey has congressmen. And so he starts to introduce all of these fake sheiks to members of Congress, government officials, and it turned out a lot of them, when you said, I would like to give you money in exchange for political favors, they were like, absolutely, that's great.
Sure.
I love money and I have
Sign me
favors
up.
to give.
We're talking about kickbacks, bribes. I mean, there are all kinds of hundreds of thousands of dollars involved in just, setting up these operations.
And, I will say that the movie, American Hustle, and I think this story in general kind of does a good job of pointing out that a lot of times these are projects that benefit real people, and that the character, the character in American Hustle, who's based on Angelo Ericetti, who's the mayor of Camden, is Carmine Polito. I don't know why they needed to go from one very sort of Italian-sounding name to another, but it's Carmine Polito, who's played by Jeremy Renner. But, I think it's one of the best parts of the movie is it shows that he genuinely cares about his constituents. He's trying to get things done for them. There's a lot of loyalty. And, how many times have we talked about corrupt politicians on this show who are also beloved because they bring home the bacon.
We create jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when government's not functioning well, and I think it is fair to say in the 1970s, that was not the glory decade for the U.S. government, locally or federally. The corruption is what gets things done. It's why you have machine politics in an era before the federal government is very strong. So you have all of these bribes now floating around. You do have shout out to South Dakota Senator Larry Pressler, because they came up to him and, did their spiel. They were like, give us contracts and we will give you money. And he was like, well, that seems illegal. And he immediately contacted the FBI. The FBI is like, no shit, we've been recording you this whole time. We noticed that you turned it down. It's fine. And anyway, so all of this leads inevitably then to the arrest of all of the people who were involved, because of course the FBI was tracking it this whole time because it was their scheme. It's the first bribery scandal that's caught on videotape. So shout out for VHS, maybe Betamax at this point. And then the trials and convictions start.
Have you ever had the urge to sneak behind the cordoned off areas of a museum? Or roam the halls after closing time? The Smithsonian's flagship podcast, Side Door, will sneak you behind the scenes of the world's largest museum and research complex. Come learn about the ghosts that supposedly walk the museum halls after dark, how a train robbery gave rise to criminal forensics, why leeches are actually the coolest thing ever, and how to get away with murder in the Arctic. Maybe. You'll discover stories of history, science, art, and culture you won't find in a display case. You can listen to Side Door wherever you get your podcasts, or find us online at si.edu/sidedoor.
So, we're a few weeks into the new year. Do you feel like a new you? One opportunity we get to reimagine ourselves can come through a new wardrobe. Seriously, refreshing your clothes can go a long way. And this year, I've resolved to keep my look fresh while also trying to stay on a budget. Luckily, there's Quince. Let's go through a few early year wardrobe items. It might be cold wherever you're listening to this right now. Well, how about a Mongolian cashmere sweater? $50. Maybe you've resolved to hit the gym more? Okay, well, there's plenty of activewear options from sports bras to leggings. New year, new business. You want to look sharp in suits and blazers. They're on there as well. For me, we're going to be doing a lot more video episodes of this podcast this year, and I'm not going to go out there looking like a schlub. So keep an eye out when you watch those for some classy sweaters and button-downs. I can get it together when I need to, folks, and Quince is going to help. Upgrade your closet this year without the upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/thisday for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday.
Is it me though? Does this not feel a little bit like entrapment? Just a little bit. Like I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, like I feel like, if you bring in someone and you said them, now sure, obviously they do not have to take the bait, but at the same time, it seemed to me like, couldn't the FBI be using its resources to do other things other than suss out people who have poor morals? Like, just seemed to like they were being set up for failure.
I mean, this is the thing. When there's not an underlying crime, right? Like there wasn't actually this big scam that was trying to be pulled off, then you are creating a crime for people to participate in. That does get you kind of close to the line of entrapment. I mean, these people get convicted, so obviously juries and judges disagreed. But it is one of those things where you're like, all right, it's one thing if you have an informant in there who's like, yeah, guys, let's do this. But it has to like generate from inside the group.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, instead of like.
And this felt like a proposition brought to them to sort of like determine if they want to accept or decline.
And, I think that the way that this played out in terms of who got convicted and who didn't shows that. I mean, the line between the people who got off and the people who didn't is pretty murky. I mean, okay, so you obviously have this South Dakota senator who basically says, like, wait a minute, I think what you're suggesting is illegal. So there's that. But, like, there's a New Jersey senator, Harrison Williams, who is indicted as part of this. But, there was a moment that's captured on tape. And they actually, I think during his trial, bring in a linguistics expert to kind of break down the tape and then try and read what he was saying. Because, this fake sheik hands him, like, a suitcase of money and basically says, like, I would like to give you some money for permanent residence in the United States. And Williams says, no, 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 no. He says no 4 times, but then he kind of softens and says, but, maybe we can work together and da-da-da-da-da, And so it's just kind of like deals get done, Sometimes people in a room together just sitting down and, maybe an exchange of favors or whatever works. You get these murky moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It's complicated in the sense that, I there's part of me that's like, this is so messed up. You shouldn't have taken this bribe, yada, yada, yada. And then there's another part of me that's slightly sympathetic to like how people can be either persuaded or pressured or manipulated to be like, well, this might actually help some people in my district, like maybe, that's not always the case, but like thinking about how it felt in trappy, like almost like a setup, is the part that feels, a little disingenuous. I
think to your point, Kellie, like the public saw this the same way you did. A lot of people were like, wait a minute, is there some entrapment going on here? Or isn't this kind of how deals get done? And I got to say, like, it reminds me a little bit of the reaction here in New York to Eric Adams, who I think a lot of people don't like and is sort of like screwing up in lots of different ways. But people were like, oh, he got some first class upgrades in exchange for pulling some real estate deals. Like, maybe we're jaundiced and cynical, but like I think a lot of people were like, really? That's it? Like
I'll fly first class.
Yeah,
those middle seats are terrible.
And they're probably like, we're sure he's done much worse than that. Come on, this is that Al Capone thing, right?
Well, yes. So look, as we're entering another moment of, I think, safe to say, a government infrastructure that is often looking out for themselves and looking for the angle. How do we then think through kind of these lines between corruption and getting deals done? How do we sort of go beyond just saying like, well, there's just got to be a norm that you trust these people to be operate in good faith, or is that really what it is?
This is a great question because I've been, I think a lot about accountability and impunity in politics. And this is still at that moment, right? This scheme is being developed in 1978. Where there is this emphasis on political corruption and we got to get the bad guys out. And this
like the post-Watergate
scheme. The post-Watergate moment when, Nixon's been taken down. There's been all of these investigations of the intelligence communities. There is this kind of good government moment in the 1970s. And this feels like it's part of it. The Keating Five later in the 1980s is also kind of part of that to a certain extent. Iran-Contra is that the mechanisms used that developed after Watergate would be used to try to rein in some of this corruption. We're pretty far out of that moment now. And I think, your question is an interesting one, Jody, because we both want accountability. And I think that there is a lack of faith in the institutions that provide it, which is why you end up in such a murky place. And we're seeing that right now. You mentioned Eric Adams. That case is just being dropped by the Trump administration after Eric Adams has been, showing loyalty and fealty. He was on Tucker Carlson a couple of weeks ago. And so I think that this is, I don't have a complete answer, but I do think it is interesting to watch how investigations develop. Along what lines and which investigations get quashed, because if it's very clear that friend or enemy is the dividing line between prosecution and non-prosecution, that seems like a big tell. Like we want some sort of shared understanding of when corruption should be prosecuted. I think we can all agree that friend versus enemy is not the proper line. But I don't have a better answer than that.
But, I think this applies to so many other things we talk about and the two of you have written about on this show, even just like political violence, Kellie, like you can write laws and you can have criminal trials and so forth. But at some level, it is also just about the kind of like the water you're swimming in at a given moment and what feels out of bounds and in bounds and whether people, because at the end of the day, like it is mostly about whether people hold themselves accountable, and you can regulate some of that. But I think this shows, like more than anything, it was like this post-Watergate moment, just like the appetite for that kind of thing was diminishing. And we've had moments in this country like that, and I think we've had moments in the other direction for sure as well. And so I just think like that's the thing we got to keep our eye on, is kind of what is just as a society the like stuff we're willing to accept,
And I also, it feels so tied to me. I love that you brought in political violence, Jody, because it feels so tied to me to an underlying systemic failure of governance, right? You get more corruption when government isn't working correctly, and less prosecuted corruption because people just want the wheels to turn. And you also get more political violence when there's something is broken in the system, right? Abolitionists wouldn't have necessarily used as much violence in order to try to end slavery if there had been any sort of political space for it, but there wasn't. And as those political spaces close, then the violence grows. And I think that as the gears of government stop turning, corruption grows because it's the only place that things are happening.
So to tie a bow on this, we said 7 people got wrapped up in the ABSCAM scandal. A bunch of other people kind of skirt by or come out looking pretty good. This Pressler guy who turned down the bribe, I think, looks pretty good. He doesn't really make it into the movie. The movie, no surprise, focuses on all the
They never make movies about you
characters.
if you're the good guy.
Exactly.
I know why.
But there is this interesting little tidbit to the movie, which I really, really love, which is this Weinberg guy who's at the heart of all this con man who gets hired to run this whole scheme. He gets paid $250,000 for his life rights for the movie, which is just like one last little angle for this guy, which I just love. And, I come from obviously like, it doesn't compare to political corruption, but I do think about the like ethics of journalism and life rights and all. And there's a lot of sketchy stuff that happens there too, like all these blurry lines about like paying people for their story or paying people to be in your piece. And so I just love that the movie about this thing also brushed up against some other sort of interesting and related murky ethical lines. So
ethical questions, yeah.
Exactly.
You want the story? Sure, pay me.
Exactly. So. Let's let Weinberg have the final line because he, in an interview with an author, Robert Greene, once said about himself, he said, "I'm a swindler, and the only difference between me and the congressman I met on this case is that the public pays them a salary for stealing." So there you go. Final words from Melvin Weinberg. And we will leave it there. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Radiotopia.